Evening. It is November 2nd, and it is time for the November Webinar Wednesday. I'm excited for this one. This month, the Social Media Committee, hosted here by Trevor, is going to be talking about a different way, an advanced approach to social media, and a couple of our partners with the National Weather Association. I'm going to go ahead and pass it right off to Trevor, but I want to remind you first that you can communicate with us via our various Twitter handles and also the hashtag NWAWebWed. We'll be all monitoring that hashtag for questions and commentary. Trevor, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Jonathan. So today we have a pretty interesting topic today, and some very special guests from the @NashSevereWeather Twitter account. Many of you may have already heard about it. They have most recently made news in the NWA community for winning the Walter J. Bennett Public Service Award at this last NWA meeting that we had in Norfolk, Virginia. So we have them on to talk about, what they've done to actually get that award and the information behind there and the background behind their program. But before we do that, I wanted to talk a little bit about this advanced social media concept. So a little bit of background about why we're talking about this topic today is because many times in the weather community, we've talked about, Facebook, Twitter. What do they do? How do you get impressions? How do you make your name in a social media? And we've seen that talk many, many times. We've seen many basic introductions into how to utilize social media effectively to communicate. So what I would like to talk about is jumping from the more basic topics like that into moving into an advanced application of social media. And what we call this is actually the virtual operations support concept. So Jonathan, if you give us those slides, there we go. We've got, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the virtual operations support concept, or basically an advanced social media strategy that we can utilize in the weather community. So I'm going to have just a few slides to talk about the background of what a program like this looks like. And then we're going to jump into the program in Middle Tennessee with @NashSevereWeather, the T-Spotter community. So as you see on this very first slide here, we're looking at what basically a very basic tweet deck that somebody at a NWS office anywhere would probably have set up. In this case, this is where I work in San Antonio. So you can already see column after column after column of information, some weather, some not, but information to keep yourself situationally aware. And this is just using Twitter, so this doesn't count for Facebook and anything else like that, all the different mediums that might go about. So during a big national disaster or severe weather event, or even just a slight risk, you can really start to get inundated by the incoming amount of information that's there. So here on the next slide, there's a definition for what a virtual operations support concept or team would be like. And it's basically, like it says here, a team of professional emergency managers or disaster volunteers around the country that lend virtual support on the side of a disaster who may otherwise be overwhelmed by the volume of incoming data. Now you can see that this comes from emergencymanagement.com. So this concept comes from the emergency management community. And in what they do with this is that they use Google services, they use all the different social mediums, all their communication technologies to help each other out remotely. And how that works is you could have a disaster, say like a fire in New Mexico, but you could have other institutions or people that are trained in other parts of the country that could lend a hand in this case. And maybe they're monitoring Twitter, maybe they're monitoring all the reports that are coming in, getting pictures, staying situationally aware, and sending that information to the site being impacted so that they can stay situationally aware, because they have a lot of things that they're already doing. Whatever the job happens to be. In the weather community, for instance, especially the weather service, you might be issuing warnings or answering phones or many different things. So your eyes can't be everywhere at one time. So it'd be better to have a little bit more help. So this last point is the most important thing, helping the overwhelming amount of incoming data. Since we started having social media in the National Weather Service in an operational setting or even the broadcast setting, you've had so much more information, and a lot of it's not good. A lot of it is stuff that you have to weed through. So how do you really mitigate that? How can you be digging for the reports, finding that needle in a haystack that you need, and still be able to get the information you need without being overwhelmed by all the noise? So moving into the next slide, here's an example of just a basic type of VOST, or virtual operations support team, that's currently being utilized in West Texas. And so you can see that this program might also work in areas that you might not be able to find reports at all, in very rural areas where there's not tons of people that are using Twitter or Facebook or anything. But there might be one or two places that you might be able to find something in otherwise quiet areas. So in the case of Midland and Lubbock Weather Service offices, they've actually partnered with the Texas Tech University Atmospheric Science and Communications Department. And those students in both of those backgrounds have worked together to search for LSR quality reports or warning verification or anything like that that might be helpful to either office when they have severe weather going on. So these students work together, they work in a lab basically, and search for this. They search for the hard reports to find. Now, in a weather service scenario, they might be doing all the many different things they're asked to do during a severe weather event. But one of the things that's really hard to do is figure out the creative different types of Twitter syntax in order to find the reports that they're looking for, in order to verify a tornado in the middle. And that's what these students are actually doing. What they'll do is if they find anything, they'll put it directly into the NWS chat room for each office and tell them, hey, we searched, found this, we quality controlled it, and now here's a report that you might be able to find useful for your different purposes. So really helping both offices in cases that might be hard to find reports. So another example of this is actually internally within the Weather Service. Here on the next slide, we have the example of what's called the Supplemental Assistance Volunteer Initiative. And the southern region part of the National Weather Service has started with an experimental program that started back in April of 2015. And in this program, we've actually used the exact same concept in order to help each other office out. So instead of students at Texas Tech that were helping out Midland or Lubbock in this case, we're actually using the workforce within the National Weather Service to help each other out. So in the case of this event in Tropical Storm Bill, while making landfall that was impacting Corpus Christi, Houston, and Austin, San Antonio, there are many different offices that weren't having as much of an increased workload because they're not directly impacted by the landfall. So the SAVI program, as it's called, it was activated so that those three offices could be supported by offices that aren't necessarily being inundated. So here's an example, and you can see from each office examples of reports being found for those three offices from these remote locations. So what this really helps the office do is it helps them get social media reports like these pictures of flooding and all these other things that are going on that you otherwise may not have been able to find because it took some time to come up with the searches, or they may not have been directly tweeted to the National Weather Service. In a lot of these cases, it was just hashtag Bill. And that's going to be, you have to look through all the different reports of Bill throughout the entire world in order to be able to find some of these reports that would be useful. So these people have one job only, not to speak for any of the offices, but just to search for these reports. And in that case, they can vastly increase the situational awareness of the offices being impacted and let them focus on some of the other duties at hand, like answering phones or issuing LSRs, or even more so, focusing on the outward message that they need to be conveying, especially with all these reports coming in. And then it brings us to why we're talking today. On the next slide here, we'll talk about the actual T-Spotter program. And I meant to make this last point about coordination in chat, but you can move on to the next slide, and we'll talk about the T-Spotter program. And then the T-Spotter program is unique in the sense that it is two ways. It's not just finding reports. They are doing that. They're actually using the hashtag T-Spotter, and anybody in Middle Tennessee area can use this hashtag to submit reports. And there's individuals that are combing through this particular hashtag to find quality reports for the National Weather Service in Nashville. So our guests here, Will and David, that's exactly what they do. And Will will talk a little bit more about this here in a second, but he'll actually go through all of the reports that come across T-Spotter, find the stuff that would be useful because he's been trained by forecasters in the Nashville office about what they want. So he goes specifically using that training to find these reports. He knows which are quality, he has the training to find it, and he knows what people are trustworthy in the field. And he'll submit that report directly into the chat room, as you see here on the left, vastly improving the amount of situational awareness for that office in Nashville, but then also eliminating the need for them to have to go find these themselves. Now, they probably do monitor T-Spotter, and I know they do monitor T-Spotter on their own sometimes, but when the chips are down and you have a really big event, this can really, really be helpful. You guys are activated 24/7. So here on the next slide, there's the other aspect of this, which is the communications aspect. So right now, the T-Spotter program is made up of multiple accounts throughout the entire CWA of Nashville. And so what they do in this particular case is that Will and David manage just the at-Nash severe weather, the yellow counties that you see here. But now they have actually broadened and recruited people throughout Middle Tennessee, and to have all the different representation that you see. And now what they also do in the case of finding reports and submitting to the Weather Service, they're also communicators of weather information outward to all these individuals. And they only have one, or in David's case, they had two counties that they're responsible for. So when that happens, they can focus the message of the National Weather Service directly to the county level, or sometimes to the street level, depending on what kind of event you're talking about, like a severe weather account. And so that's the benefit that maybe an office may not necessarily be able to do, because they're focused on the entire CWA or county warning area. But these individuals are only concerned with that one county. So they get training from the National Weather Service directly multiple times a year. And then they use that training to communicate and package the information so that it is hyper-local and specific to the user. And that's truly an advanced concept within social media, that you have to be able to provide this information so that it's relevant to the people that are using it on their phones, using it on their mobile devices. And so that's a little bit about a background of virtual operations support teams. So you've seen how they can be a very basic type of scenario. They could be used in multiple ways, multiple flavors. And so what we're going to talk about today is really the inspiration behind this idea of the T-Spotter concept, and how this virtual operations support team has proven to be successful in the operational environment. So more formally, I'd like to introduce both Will Minkoff and David Drobny, responsible for the @NashSevereWeather Twitter account, and then also the T-Spotter program that, as you see here today. So how about Will? Do you want to start off a little bit about how this came to be and the inspiration behind the idea?
Sure. Thank you, Trevor, and thank you for having us. It's always a pleasure to talk to the NWA community. We started a little over 6 years ago, I guess. The way it came to be, I guess, to address your question directly, David and I were putting weather information on Twitter for a while now, and we had an event at a shopping mall near us that caused flash flooding. There was a thunderstorm that brought very heavy rains to a particular area. As we were putting information out on Twitter, we started receiving information back from our Twitter followers, who numbered in the dozens at the time, that there were cars that were becoming submerged in the parking lot of a shopping mall. Certainly a situation that would call for a flash flood warning, but the Weather Service didn't have that information at the time. They would have pushed the button had they had known, but they didn't know. 39 minutes went by before a flash flood warning was issued, and we talked to each other, and we thought to ourselves, hey, listen, if the Weather Service had this information, if they had the pictures that we were seeing, or the tweets that we were getting about cars becoming submerged in a parking lot, they would probably be better able to protect life and property and issue a flash flood warning sooner. So we started knocking on the door of the Weather Forecast Office in Nashville and said, hey, listen, we know that we're just some amateur guys out there on the internet, but we think that we have some valuable information. And the Weather Service said, oh yeah, sure, okay. So we, weren't defeated. We applied for chat access and were denied. We applied for chat access again and again, and were denied. And finally, David approached Tom Johnstone from the Weather Service office in Nashville and said, hey, listen, if you'll just have lunch with us, we'd like to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing. Tom agreed and had lunch with David, and it turned out that there was some valuable information that we could provide them, and we started on a bit of a pilot project. That pilot project turned into now, I think, nearly 20 counties in Middle Tennessee that have a trained, hyper-local social media partner that is able to provide information that they get from the Weather Service to their Twitter followers, and they are better able to promote the T-Spotter hashtag, which is a method for us to receive information back from the public. Like you said, Trevor, it's basically a way for us to gather information, package it up, quality control it, and send it to the Weather Service in an effort to make more and better LSRs. The way our model works, there are 3 of us that tweet on a regular basis. We, during a severe weather event, will divide our duties. David will concentrate on radar updates to our Twitter followers, basically handling all of the outbound communication to our followers. I am responsible for handling all of the inbound communication from our followers. And then we have a third person who kind of plays the float and is available to back up either David or I should we have to go down because we lost power or internet, or simply when we need to put our kids to bed, because we do this as amateurs. We are regular people with jobs and families and lives. So it takes 3 of us to run it. Now, like you'd mentioned earlier, we do only cover 2 counties. Okay, so we don't have nearly the burden in coverage that, say, a TV meteorologist would have. That makes things a little bit easier for us in that we don't have to cover so much ground, but it also has its own drawbacks in that people think that because we can cover only 2 counties, we can drill down timing of thunderstorms to the minute for their particular street or neighborhood. We haven't been able to outrun the science yet, but we do our level best to communicate effectively to our followers the best hyperlocal information that science allows at the time.
So, Will, now that you had mentioned that there's 2 aspects of this, you had touched on something, and you kept saying the word trained. You've been trained by people at the National Weather Service. So,
Sure.
I was going to let David take this question. What exactly do you mean by training? Do you mean like you've talked to a forecaster, you've had spotting training? What exactly do you mean?
Sure. Well, thanks for having Will and I, Trevor, and WA as well. Yeah, so our training is in person. And it starts with meeting the WCM in our office, and we've had 2 since we've been doing this, and getting to know them and going to lunch with them or having dinner with them or whatever, and having kind of a personal relationship. And then we'll do training that's at least once every twice a year. We'll do twice a year training. We'll go down to the Weather Service office. We've had a lead forecaster or sometimes a WCM there will be ready for us and have a slideshow that's not unlike the one that they will regularly do for local media to update us on what's the latest and greatest thing in radar. What are we doing now with warnings that might be different? This is a tornado degree signature. This is not a tornado degree signature. This is how you use correlation coefficient to determine where the freezing line might be or where we're going from snow to ice or whatever, and just basic information about weather radar concepts that's important to us, because when we are looking at the data and getting reports, we need to be able to quality control those reports. And the first step in doing that is making sure that we're co-locating 2 things that are, that make sense. A report needs to make sense with what's on radar, so we can at least have an idea of whether or not the report we're about to put in the chat makes sense. So that training usually takes 3 or 4 hours to do, and we're doing it twice a year. Some of the concepts in the past aren't unlike the ones that you might have done at your local WFO, but at a much more basic level. So, we'll learn about sales. We'll learn about scanning strategies with how they're setting the radar. We learned about when we came out with the tags that were with the warnings, the considerable tag and those kind of things. And the idea is not just that we need to quality control the reports that we're getting, but also for the information that we're giving people, that we're telling people the right thing, that we are effectively and accurately communicating the message that the Weather Service wants us to communicate. It's very important to me and to Will and to Andrew, who's the 3rd person on our team. We need to be sure that we're giving a consistent, unified one message, and that everything that we do is sourced. So if we say something about a storm, it's sourced either in radar, it's sourced from the text of a Weather Service statement, or it's something that I'm confident is true. For example, the reflectivity on this thunderstorm is 55 dBz. You probably don't want to be driving through that. It's going to be hard to see, those kind of things. But we need to be sure that as we do this, that we are accountable to people. And our accountability is with the National Weather Service office in Nashville. And so as part of that relationship, we need to meet them. And, we need to meet not just the WCM or one of the leads. We need to know who the SU is. We need to know who all the forecasters are. And they need to know us, and we need to know them, so that when things really do get bad and we need to trust each other, we've met each other. And that trust is difficult to get if you haven't actually met somebody, had dinner with them, and kind of know what their personality is like, so you're not misinterpreting each other when you're talking to it. So I hope that answers your question. But the training is, it's a half a day. And for some of the people, the other coordinators, they're coming from a long way. And so they're pretty dedicated. We're obviously local to the Weather Service office here. But it's not just, here's a couple slides. It's, do you guys get this? Do you understand what this means? And we've actually enjoyed it. We have a good time with it.
Yeah. So, okay. So you're saying a training isn't just, here's information, now go use it. There's an aspect to this that's also trust. Because if we were just asking anyone in the field to, hey, go speak for us, we could get into a lot of trouble. And one of the things that you put there is, we need to know what you mean when you say things. We need to know, so we aren't jumping in to interrupt you when you're in the middle of a severe event. And we're not asking a bunch of pesky questions all the time. This training is intended so you know how to answer those questions if they come your way. Because you had mentioned before that there's an inherent responsibility to being a weather communicator, is that you have to also be able to provide that information when it's asked of you. There's a trust that gets inherently built as you build your own brand. So having that information coming directly from the inside source, which is the Weather Service in this case, is really important. So my question, again, for you, David, is about consistency. So I imagine with all these different accounts, the message can often go through the telephone game type of thing. And you could have somebody say, oh, the Weather Service says that there's a warning for here. So that's not really something we have to worry about. So how do you, with the consistency stuff, how do you maintain that consistency with the messaging of the Weather Service? Are you saying things that are differently? Like, how do you solve that problem?
Sorry, I need to unmute. If we have a question about something, or we have a disagreement, first of all, it's ridiculous for me to disagree with what anybody at the Weather Service says, because I'm a volunteer. I'm not a meteorologist by trade. So if I'm about to say something that I think they might disagree with, I get to them in chat, and I either send them a private message, or I just ask them straight up in the chat room, hey, is this, what's up with this gate-to-gate shear over here? People are asking me about it, or something like that. How do I do it? If I disagree or have a different opinion, I just don't share it. So I will ask the Weather Service, say, hey, we're getting a lot of questions about this snow event. When's the ice going to turn to snow? And I source that information directly from them. So to be consistent is, we don't make stuff up. We don't put in our opinions. And if we do, it's not an opinion that could possibly contradict with what the Weather Service is saying. The number one question I get in a severe weather event is, what time? What's the ETA? So I will source that one of three ways. I'll say, here's the HRRR model. If you believe it, take it for what it's worth. Here's what it says. Or I can track the storm and say, if it continues to move at 55 miles an hour, I can do the math and say it'll be there in 2 hours. Or I'll just ask the Weather Service straight up, hey, you guys, can you put an ETA graphic up on your website? Or can you mention the ETA in the aviation product that you're doing for the Nashville International Airport, so that I can say, oh, okay, you think it'll be here 22Z. Now I can translate that. So the way we stay consistent is to remain sourced. We get inconsistent when we start to stray. Personally, I think more information is usually good. We don't post 386-hour model data from GFS on the snow event that's coming here in the middle of November. So there are certain guidelines that we follow. But I'll say, look, one model says this, another model says that, a third model says a third thing. Hey guys, this is uncertain. There's an inherent uncertainty here. And I think people want the information, but they also want to know that the information on a one model run really isn't all that great. So where the Weather Service wants us to fill in not that they want us to fill in the gaps, but where we fill in the gaps from the questions we get. We read every single AFD that comes through, aviation too. And so we have read everything that the Weather Service has put out, and that's how we stay on message and on task.
Yeah, so that's kind of the question I was asking there is where do you get your information from? Are you pulling this out of are you trying to become a meteorologist yourself, or are you simply repackaging information that you've already been given? That's what it sounds like you're doing there. So
I would say, Trevor, our job is to translate it from weather nerd into regular speak. So if if there's an aviation update that comes out, and it says, hey, it'll be here at 22Z. Well, people don't know what 22Z means. So I can say, hey, the Weather Service just put out a product, and I translate the time. It's going to be here at 5 o'clock, or whatever it is.
There's always like that the scientist to the citizen. That communication is not always the cleanest. And you yourself, being a citizen, a trained citizen, knows how to speak citizen, which a lot of us scientists always don't know how to do that. We always get lost in some of our own terminology or lots of other things like that. But so this is an interesting, because you have a direct relationship with the Weather Service office. So I guess my logical question next, I'm going to give it to Morgan now. Morgan is a meteorologist at the National Weather Service in Mobile, Alabama. So Morgan, putting on your Weather Service hat and being a social media focal point like you are, what kind of benefits does the local office get from this? Like, how much does this help you?
It helps a lot. It allows us to have multiple sets of eyes on everything that's coming in terms of social media. You have people that are vetting the information, which I definitely don't have time to do during an event. I'm usually, unless it's a big event, there's usually one person in an office that is doing all of the social media in addition to all of the rest of the tasks. So I'm multitasking. I'm answering all of the phones. I'm relaying the warnings via all of our radios to our emergency manager partners. I'm monitoring NOAA weather radio, issuing storm reports, making graphics for social media and for our partners. And we're trying to push all of the information out in terms of the warnings and just awareness and preparedness types of information. So having somebody else be able to look at all of that info and tell us what's going on in the field, that's something that I don't usually have a lot of time to do, and I don't have the time to search for it. So it helps a lot to have someone be able to not only look at that, but also vet that information, make sure that it's correct.
So in your experience, you aren't in Nashville working directly with these guys, but you've utilized BOSS before with the Savvy program, right? And you've been on both sides, being somebody who's searched for information and then somebody who's been helped search for information by some of your peers. So just talk a little bit about some examples of how that's helped directly in your office.
Well, like I said, we're trying to multitask if we're in an event, and if I have people that are on the Savvy team looking for those reports, I know that they are not only vetting the information for me, but those people that are looking at the reports and looking for the reports are really kind of content matter experts. They're already meteorologists. They already know a fair amount about severe weather, tropical weather, you name it, and they know a lot about it because we have to be so well trained in this sort of thing. So from the standpoint of getting help from Savvy, it helps tremendously. On the other side, trying to look for reports is pretty easy, at least for me. When I was helping with Hurricane Matthew going up the coast of Florida, I knew in general what to look for, what keywords to look for, in general what areas to look for, and what type of impacts to be looking for in specific areas, whether it was storm surge or whether we were looking for tornadoes, which we didn't really have in this event, or if I needed to be looking for specific types of damage. So it helps on both sides.
So, okay, so from there's multiple jobs that you just said that you have to do from a local office standpoint. And one of them is searching for reports on social media. But another one is communicating via social media, is actually putting out the tweets, the information that you have, that's coming in. So, that's got to be pretty overwhelming, which is kind of what we said before, is having to focus on two things, two-way communication here. Now, the Weather Service, and I'm somebody who does this as well, has the issue with, okay, we need to communicate as much as we can with everything that comes our way. And then in an office like in Nashville, where it's a major metropolitan area, or in mine in Austin, San Antonio, where I've got two of those, we have questions coming from every direction, and the answers are not the same for everybody. And so it's very difficult from a weather service side, at least in my opinion, put my weather service hat on for a second, to be able to communicate and be able to disseminate information and data report or data mine at the same time. So I want to know how David and Will, I'll direct this one to Will, because you often are getting the incoming data here. So speak to the importance of actually maintaining that two-way communication. Is it important to be able to address everything that comes your way?
Two-way communication between us and the Weather Service, or us and our followers?
And your followers, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. We aren't just a one-way street where we will send out information to Twitter followers and then walk out of the room. We constantly promote our T-Spotter hashtag as an avenue for people to send us storm reports. The two-way communication about a particular event begins days before the event is supposed to occur. We refresh, if it's, let's say, a spring or summer severe thunderstorm, if we have a day 2 slight risk or moderate risk, we're going to start talking about what is severe criteria, what is reportable criteria, how to communicate hail size to us, how to communicate thunderstorm wind damage to us. During an event, we're also constantly promoting the T-Spotter hashtag as an avenue to receive information, and really make a conscious effort to tell people what kind of good they're able to foster through their reports, that these reports turn into ground truth for the Weather Service that aids Weather Service forecasters, Weather Service meteorologists in issuing watch and warning products, right, or warning products. We are, trying to relay to them the significance of giving us a timely and accurate report.
So there's information that they need to know. And I like in your case with T-Spotter, when you, as somebody who's in charge of the incoming information, you mentioned there's a lot of times where we need to clarify what we're looking for. We need to, it's not just that we need hail reports, but we need hail reports of a certain size. So you can start to hone in that information. So it's not just a bunch of noise, that now that the people that are familiar with how T-Spotter works, they know, oh, they asked for this, so I got to provide this. It's a ruler and some snow, or a ruler next to a hailstone, or a coin, or something like that. So you can really drive home that Weather Ready Nation message. And so that sort of brings me, there's that aspect of it, but there's another aspect of with the two-way communication, and it gets back to that relationship building thing. And so I'll throw this one back over to David. You had mentioned almost every time I hear you speak, you talk about you have to give information to get information. So elaborate on that.
Yeah, so I know a lot of people are going to say, well, gosh, I want to get some reports into my local office. Well, if you're not giving them something they want, they're not going to come to you to give them to give information. And we promote this hashtag across all of the Middle Tennessee WFO range, right, to that CWA. But the hashtag isn't the only place we get reports. We get them in our replies. And in fact, we might get a few more reports from replies because people first of all, they see us every day. that they'll hear from us at least 3 times a day, usually more. We have a conversation with them. We try to, when the stuff's slow or we're waiting for a record report to come in, we'll put a GIF in there, or we'll say something that's vanilla but at least has some personality. You know, you stay away from religion, politics, and SEC football, and you're fine. But if you have that relationship, and when people wake up in the middle of the night, they know you're going to be tweeting, you get a sense of trust and with them, and they know that they can come to you for information, and if they see something, they know where to put it. And the one thing about social media that makes this concept work is it's so easy to do. I mean, you can put a photo of something, and then you can send it, and you can geotag it, or you can say where you are. So much quicker than the old way, which was picking up the phone and calling the weather service and interrupting them and having a stressful 90-second call trying to figure out what it is you saw, where were you, and when did you see it. So if you already have that relationship with the community and they know you're going to be there and you're giving them something they need, like, gosh, is there a tornado warning? We always say, look, follow multiple reliable sources. But if you're one of those reliable sources and you don't want to turn on the television, or you're in this increasingly mobile society, at a baseball game and you can't turn on the TV or stream an app or something, it's good to have a quick and easy way to communicate with people and get information. I think that if you're not giving people a reason to come, they're never going to come and give you reports. So you have to give them information. But I think what I think makes us work is that we aren't trying to cover 39 counties in Middle Tennessee. Because what I'm finding, and kind of one of the reasons why I started doing this to begin with, is I got frustrated with the storm that was in Clarksville, which is an hour's drive away from here. And I was turning on the news and they're covering that storm, which they should. And it's important they cover that storm. But I want to know about the storm coming to my house. And I don't want to wait for the person in Clarksville to get their information before I can get my information. So that's why we're just those 2 counties, because we know what's going on in these counties. We live in one county, we work in the other. We know that, like right now, the CMA awards are going on downtown. If there was a storm, we would know that. We'd be able to tweet to that. I can tell you when the festival is here in Franklin. I can tell you, Andrew can tell you what's going on in Owensville. I mean, we know what's going on so that we can tell people what to expect, because there's going to be 20,000 people at the Titans game, or hopefully more, or the people are going to the Predators game tonight. Do I need a jacket? Is there going to be, all of these things about being local is so important, because people just don't have the time or the patience, or even really, that's not that they don't care, but they're just not going to come to you if they're going to have to wait to get information about someplace they don't live.
Yeah, we certainly hear that all the time. We hear about, hey, you guys are tweeting a lot to Nashville or Austin or San Antonio or downtown Mobile, and what's going on where I'm at? Why do I care about this? This is not for me. And so being able to provide that hyper local benefit is really what you're able to do in that one county that you're focused on. So that's really good insight there about why this is a little bit different than maybe the way that the National Weather Service operates. So just wanted to take this opportunity to remind you, everybody watching, that you can also ask us questions, and you can do so either via the YouTube link that you're watching here, or you could tweet to us at NWAWebWed, the hashtag there. And there's also the Zombie Trev 5K is me, Morgan Abigail is Morgan, and then Jonathan Bellis is Jonathan Bellis. So do we have any questions, Jonathan?
We do have a question on the YouTube page. We have a question from Southwest Texas Chaser that is asking, how do you deal with other local hashtags? We've had the state hashtags like TX Weather or TN Weather, and a lot of those are buried sometimes in some bot tweets. How do you guys deal with those statewide hashtag? And also, how well is your T-Spotter hashtag working for you?
Well, sure. I think there's probably all of us can answer that question.
Yep,
probably.
So I left it open.
I'll take that.
Go ahead, Will.
First of all, in dealing with competing hashtags, obviously in Tennessee we have hashtag TNWX. What we found is that if we devote our promotion time to a single hashtag, in the end, it will make a bigger impact for us. We work with the Weather Forecast Office in Nashville so that in any of their posting on social media, they reference that hashtag. We have a unified message in our branding of that hashtag. It's the only one that we use. We don't pay any attention to any of the other ones. If it were a case of one person thinking that one hashtag is more significant than another, that's really a good lead into the second part of that question, which is how well is T-Spotter working? The answer to that question is the T-Spotter is working really well. T-Spotter, if you were to look at a graph of hashtags in the country related to weather, I would venture to guess that T-Spotter is near the top. T-Spotter has been a trending topic on Twitter, both locally and nationally, a number of different times. If we stick to our guns, we don't deviate from that T-Spotter hashtag, then in the end, it will be very impactful. And it's, I think we're seeing that a lot. I think we're seeing that it's having an impact, that people are paying attention to it. The number of LSRs at the Weather Forecast Office in Nashville has gone up significantly since we've implemented that T-Spotter hashtag. The thing that I would say, the point I would drive home is stick to your guns. Stick with that hashtag. Work hard to make that hashtag impactful.
Okay, so you've created basically a hashtag brand. So the point now is that people in your area now through through sharing it through spotter trainings, and then doing it through tweeting about it, reminding people what it's used for. People sort of get the idea that this is what it's used for, and the visibility of it means that you don't really have to go to places like TWX, if I understand you right. So that works for T-Spotter. And I want to get back to Martin's question about the state hashtags. There's a lot of noise that goes into that. There's a fact, I think one of the things he's mentioning too is that you can have a lot of automated tweets from weather stations that are just clogging up the state hashtag. We've seen that all the time. So I know that that Morgan has some expertise on how to kind of filter out that noise. So Morgan, what are some of the ways that you can mitigate that problem of being polluted with a bunch of stuff you don't need?
Yeah, usually when I'm sending out tweets, I'm using those hashtags, but I don't actually use those state hashtags when I'm searching for anything. When I'm searching for anything on Twitter or on TweetDeck, I'm usually using certain keywords like wind damage. And you can actually use other words within that, wind or damage, wind and damage, things like that. There's tons of different things that you can do in order to find the type of report that you want. We used it very heavily during Hurricane Matthew on the Savvy team. And we also use geocoding as well. You can set up not only, if you're looking for hail damage in a particular town, you can set up like a 20-mile radius around that town. Now you're going to exclude some people that don't have the geocoding or the location turned on their tweets, but it will get you a fair amount of good tweets. So that's one way, or I guess multiple ways, that you can use the search function in order to data mine and find a whole bunch of information on Twitter and TweetDeck.
Yeah, just accidentally muted myself instead of unmuting myself. So yeah, we've got it now. We've sort of become. It's definitely not something you just know how to do. It's something that I think even those of us that data mine on a regular basis are learning the different ways that you can do it. And a lot of the times, we may start at something like TXWX or TNWX or ALWX. We may start there, and then you find out that hashtags are being used that we wouldn't have thought of. For instance, if a tornado is hitting a town, often a lot of times the name of the town is what's being hashtagged, and variations of that, misspellings of that even. And so, or even hashtag tornado and hashtag city name. There's all sorts of different things. And there's ways to actually extract just that. And so there's even a way that you can find positive tweets and negative tweets in the tweets that you put out. So there's a lot of ways you can do it. I would suggest that anyone watching, if you wanted to explore this, that you wanted to just go and look at, go to Twitter and then just look for some of the advanced search syntax, and you'll be able to find out all the different ways that you can pull out and extract information. That's really useful. And I think we also got a question. Jonathan, what was did you say we had another question about from the YouTube link?
Yeah, we had from Jag731 was asking about how weather forecast offices local hashtags are working for you guys. Maybe this is just for Trevor and Morgan. And how are the results so far since those have been implemented?
Okay, well, I can actually answer that because he's mentioning actually EWX spotter, and somebody who's actually I wanted to mention the last two questions came from two individuals that are hoping to do a very similar type thing to what @Nash Severe Weather's doing down in my neck of the woods in Austin, San Antonio, and they're in charge of an account called Bayer Severe Weather and or Bayer Co Severe Weather, and so that is the account that they're using to do a very similar thing to what the @Nash Severe Weather folks are doing, David and Will here. And so their questions are about the hashtag that our area is utilizing. Obviously, we can't use T-Spotter. That one's being used is specific to the Middle Tennessee area. So we have to come up with a similar but different thing in all the different areas that might be specific. Now, if we use TXWX, that's going to be all of Texas. So how do we focus in on just our CWA? So we decided to use EWX, which is the three-letter call sign for the county warning area in Austin, San Antonio. EWX is our office destination. So we're using EWX spotter. And it's sort of a play on words because we lowercase e, capital double X. So E weather spotter. So just something to kind of be catchy so people would remember it. So that's what we're utilizing down there. Now we're not as sophisticated as what there are up there in Nashville, but they kind of have I think a 3 or 4 year head start on us. So down in our neck of the woods, we're sort of doing something similar. There's Bayer County Severe Weather, but there's also Travis County Severe Weather. And they're actually up to about 15, I think it's almost 1,700 followers now. And they're doing a very similar thing. In fact, David and Will gave a presentation to them when we invited them to our office to do the very same thing that we're doing up there. So it's not exactly the same program, but it's under the same idea. It's the same framework so that we can build our own brand down there in another office. So having said that, what that means is that if you're an operational forecaster across the country, there's no reason why you can't do something similar to this. You don't have to follow the way that we're doing it either in Middle Tennessee or down in my neck of the woods, but you could do something similar. I believe that some other offices are utilizing a hashtag of the same thing. Tallahassee, I believe, is using a TLH spotter, and I believe Louisville, Kentucky is also using LMK spotter. So they're doing variations of the very same thing to kind of do the same purpose. So you can do this all over the country. There's no reason why you can't. And if you needed more information on how to do that, feel free to tweet any of us because we can tell you how to get started and kind of help you through that. So I know that we're getting towards the end of this. We're about 10 till the top of the hour. So, but I did want to say one more thing, and I think it's important. I'll actually send this over to David because you had mentioned something about when you interact with the public, there's something really important to remember. So go ahead and elaborate on it.
Yeah, so my biggest frustration when I do this is I might have said something, as Will was saying, 3 days ago, 2 days ago, and now the day of, and it's about to come, and we said the ETA is 9 o'clock about 7,300 times, and the ETA hasn't changed, and at 8:45 we get, what time is this coming? Or @reply, what time is this coming? Or they have not bothered to scroll back in the timeline to figure out what is going on. The number one thing you should do to remember, because honestly, I get like, what am I doing this for? You're not listening. I have to remind myself the number one thing is to be patient with the public. They are sometimes scared, curious. They just want to know. So when you feel that frustration, hand it off to your partner and then cool off a little bit. But more importantly, just be patient with them. Don't criticize them for asking you a question, even if you feel like it's a dumb question, or they haven't respected the time that you put into that blog post that you put on the website or that tweet that you wrote 20 minutes ago. be patient with them and answer the question. And finally, for those of you who are starting or thinking about doing this, I would say that the two ways you build a following like this are first just by being there and showing up and tweeting what you see. But at the end of the day, storms make followers. It's just the truth. You can try promotions and polls and funny gifts and whatever, but people aren't going to come to you because you're hilarious. They're going to come to you because they need weather information. Something's going on. They need the weather information badly. So just be patient with the people, be patient with your growth, and just in the storms, you know, God forbid the storms are going to come. We don't want them to come. We don't talk about storms and positive things that we're excited that they're coming. Storms are always bad, but you should just be patient with it and say, gosh, you know, I've only grown a little bit. Well, I mean, you know what? We grew with each thunderstorm and each snow event, and it's been 6 years. So I just encourage you just to stick with it. If you're doing good work and you're there, people will come when the storms come.
Yeah, that's very important. I mean, I can tell you just by operating a weather service account, I've operated 3 different ones now, and I get that frustration too. I just answered a question, and then somebody will ask me the exact same question that I just answered. And, you know, I can get frustrated with that, but it doesn't mean don't answer that question, because you have to still do what you're there to do, which is provide the information to all those people. And I think there's another very key point here, which you may have already mentioned, but you can't take a storm off, right?
Hold
oh,
on.
you're muted again.
Sorry. I'm unmuted now. Yeah, one of the reasons we have 3 people is because some of us need to sleep. And, you know, when I was doing this for a very brief time by myself, I realized I needed help because these storms don't care. The QLCS that comes in at 3 a.m. doesn't care that you have to be at work in the morning. But people need to know that you're going to be there. If you miss a storm, they're going to wonder about whether or not you're really there. And frankly, you know, we didn't used to always put the NWS daily forecast up. But I didn't like the fact that a day had gone by where somebody was scrolling through their Twitter timeline and didn't see us. So we started the website so we could have a static piece of information there, and then we'll do it at 6:30. We'll do a next day. Here's your high low and a little tagline, and here's where you get more information. And we'll send a similar tweet out at 9 o'clock in the morning. And when I get up in the morning, I take a look. I read the AFD that was published between 3 and 4 a.m. and I say, you know, here's what we're looking at today, and then whatever else is going on. So.
Yeah, so you know, you're there all the time. I mean, you're just as tired as any weather service forecaster that's out there having to work a midnight shift or anything like that. And it's almost worse because, you know, like you said, you have day jobs too. You have to get up and go still do the stuff that you're supposed to do. And then the thing that they're not mentioning is they also have families, they have kids that they're raising, and all of the other things. So the fact that they're able to do this to the level that they do it for as long as they've done it is frankly just insane, which is why they're very deserving members of the Public Service Award. I mean, just from the amount of work altogether. So on behalf of the NWA, again, I want to thank you guys for the service that you guys provide, because if it wasn't for folks like you, you know, that we would be sitting there trying to still figure out how to solve this problem. And now that we have a solution, that we might be able to actually get this better and move forward with this. So hey, we only about 5 minutes left on the hour. So is there any last questions, Jonathan, from out there?
No, I think we touched on, we had a question come in from WDAM, which I believe is in Mississippi, but I think we touched on it about how maybe a best practice from maybe both of our T-Spotter personnel, the best practice on trying to recruit people. And I think you touched on it in saying that storms bring in the most recruiting, or most recruits rather. Guess I can throw that out to either of you.
Yeah, let me unmute.
David, do you want to take that question, or would you like me to?
He's having unmute issues.
Well,
so go ahead,
I'll go ahead and answer the question. In recruiting, you know, really we were blessed. It was pretty easy for us. For the most part, people that wanted to be involved in what we were doing approached us and said, hey, is there somebody that does this for my county? We would say, no, there really isn't. And they would say, well, I may be interested in doing it. How did you guys get started? I'll say this. The easiest way to recruit for a weather forecast office anywhere in the country would be to follow the people that are tweeting about the weather in your area now. Watch what they say. If they're on point, if they're on message, if they're not reckless with the things that they say, if they're not posting, a 300-hour model run, and they're polite, they're attentive, they're intelligent, then those are the type of people that you want to approach and say, hey, is this something that you would consider? Can we train you? Can we give you some information that would help you do this better? Are you available to do this, all the time? So we were approached by a few different people that said, hey, we have an interest in this. We were also fortunate to be able to approach some people that were making intelligent comments to us about the weather in their area and say, hey, would you be interested in doing this for a particular county, either the county that you live in or maybe the next county over or something like that. So in finding recruits, really you just need to pay attention to the people that are tweeting now and see if they would be viable candidates to do this.
Yeah, so a lot of what you just said is kind of how we got started down in my neck of the woods too. We wanted to see who was already basically doing it, who was already making a point to submit us reports, not just reports, but quality reports. The reports that they've gone to a spotter training, they've understood what we're looking for. They are doing it with every storm. They're always somebody we can count on. And that's kind of how we got to the people that we have now, is that we've developed this rapport with them. We've understood that they're people that are dedicated public servants. And we invited them over to the office and just said, hey, we got this program. We think you guys might be good for it. What do you think? Because what we know we're doing as the Weather Service is asking them to do a very big responsibility here. And every time that I've done this and I've reached out to people, I've told them, like, this is not a little thing to ask. And it's certainly no reason why you're perfectly well within your rights to say, no, I don't want to do it. It's a volunteer thing. It's just, if you're really interested in this, here's an opportunity, something that I really enjoy doing. And so far, we've had some really good success with that, building relationship, watching them do what they do.
I would also add to that, Trevor, if you're looking for candidates to do something like this, don't look for the people that are trying to get their name in the paper or trying to be famous or dramatic. We were never trying to be famous. We were certainly never trying to be dramatic. We are, in almost every effort, are trying to remain understated. Are trying to be almost demure about what we're doing. That attitude, that policy has taken us to, I think we're north of 94,000 Twitter followers now. And we didn't get there by being, by being dramatic, by trying to get famous. We got there by delivering reliable information on a consistent basis.
I think that's a good point. This discussion has been very enlightening for me, being outside of the kind of local community. I work mostly with national weather at this point. But I think it's always a challenge in this new world of social media to gain some sort of connection to the local weather and all of our viewers. But we're going to go ahead and wrap up. But I have one last question for Trevor now. This Webinar Wednesday is brought to you by the Social Media Committee, and I want to have Trevor showcase off that Social Media Committee that he is chair of. Trevor? Nope, I cannot hear you. Nope. Well, we'll go ahead and I'll have Trevor send out some tweets afterwards to get some of that information out. Last minute technical difficulty, but I would very much like to thank all of our panelists tonight. Very interesting dialogue, as I said, between the four. Trevor, are you good? No, okay. Okay. But I wanted to thank everyone. I think it was a very enlightening discussion. We had YouTube tonight kind of blow up tonight more than we've had on any of the other webinars. We'd like to invite you to send us any questions. All of our panelists have Twitter handles. So we'd like to continue that discussion on Twitter tonight. And I'll be watching YouTube for the next hour or so if any of those questions come in. And I'll direct those to whoever you would like to talk to. The T-Spotter program has been a fantastic program. They've kind of perfected that practice in their area. Go ahead and ask them for best practices. We will be back on the first Wednesday of December. I honestly haven't looked at the calendar to see who is back on for December, to be honest, so I'll tweet that out as soon as I know that information. But again, I'd like to thank all of you for being available tonight and having this fantastic discussion. Thank you. And as Trevor's doing, a round of applause for all of us, a silent round of applause for everyone. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.